السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Okay, so today we continue with one of the three shortest surahs of the Quran, Surah al Asar. It comes after Al-Hakumut Takathur, which we did previously, with a reminder about the fact that we should not get too involved in the accumulation of wealth and getting involved with the mutual rivalry with others in terms of how much we earn, how much we have. And the reminder was that in the last ayah was that you're going to be questioned about every na'im or every blessing or every ni'mat that you were granted with in this world. So this surah continues with that theme, talking about time. Now, in order to understand this hadith is quite relevant. This is the one reported by Ibn Abbas, who reported that the Messenger of Allah said, take advantage of 5 things before 5 other things overcome you in your life. The one is your youth before your old age. So essentially, when we are born, we are blessed with sort of good youth, good health, good body, a mind, something that you can think, your heart that's pumping, your breathing that's going on normally. So in essence, everything that's working in your body right now while you are in your youthful stages of your life, must appreciate all those bounties and ni'am or benefits that we have before old age creeps in, and then you don't have your mobility like you had before. Your bodily organs don't function as they should. You're more prone to sickness and ill health and dreaded diseases and the like. So what we need to do is appreciate the fact that we've got good health now and good youth, and the age is still young, so that we can do things and still service not only humanity but even our own personal needs. Then the third thing is about your riches before your poverty. So all of us, as we work, we earn, and as we earn, we do spend as well. But what we need to be wary of is the fact that these riches, although they are given to us, but they're given to us as a further ni'mat, as a further blessing, and we need to use it wisely, save wisely, not hoard the money, but don't be miserly as well. But at the same time, don't be extravagant and just blow money on frivolous, frivolous kind of things. The fourth thing we must be aware of is the fact that we have sometimes free time on hand before life takes over and we have to do extra hard work or more studies or doing something that keeps us going to such an extent that we forget other priorities as well. So while we have free time, we must appreciate that free time as well and use it wisely. And then lastly, remembering that your life is also not going to last forever. You must value your life and what it has given you and the opportunities it is awarded to you before death overtakes you, and then you will be no more, as it were. So these are the 5 things we need to appreciate. And all this has to do with, in essence, like the time that's moving on in our life. And this is what Wal Asr is about. Asr is about time. All right, so these were the 3 ayat revealed in Makkah. It starts off with an oath because you can see the word were in front here. We've had Wal Adiyat and Wat Duha, many other oaths in the Quran, starting with the were. And normally, how the oath works is you swear by the asr, which means time, becomes the object of the oath. And the actual subject, in other words, what Allah is warning us or telling us about in this oath, saying that definitely that with the passing of time, with the advent of time, or with time marching by, surely innal insana lafi khusr, is in a state of loss. And other synonyms for al-asr in English would be like the late afternoon, because Asr is also the Salatul Asr. And normally we know that to be in the late afternoon. And it's for instance, it's perhaps the last hour or hour and a half just before the sunset and before the end of the day going into night. So it's a late afternoon. It's about how time goes in like the decline of time or the declining day. Also, it can refer to a period or an epoch, like a period in time. Could have been like a decade or a century or even a millennium, whatever. It could be in a piece of time, right? Whatever the length is of that particular time. Also, time through the ages, as age goes by, different sort of communities or societies or empires have lived in certain periods of time, and all of them have come to pass, and now somebody else is in charge, and new life sort of always succeeds and takes over from the old. So it's to do with this advent or the passing of time. Uh, then it talks about what makes us successful. If we don't want to be in the state of loss, khusr is the word loss, the only ones that will not be in the state of loss is illa, is except those who, and then here we have four verbs. Here, this one is from Iman, so Iman is to do with having faith. Amanu is they believe, except those that have faith or those that believe. And Amal is the deed or the action of solihat. Solih is like good deeds or righteous deeds or the right thing to do. So those are going to be in loss or not going to be in loss are those who have Iman, those who have righteous deeds or do righteous deeds all the time. And they don't just stop there, it carries on word. There's a third condition here, tawasu bil haq. Tawasi means to exhort one another or encourage one another. Bil haq is with truth or with justice or with the right thing. And we also encourage each other with another thing which is important, which is sabr, because you will be faced with trials and tribulations in life and you will need to endure those because that comes with the package of what we call life. Now, this surah is about not so much about just success, what makes you successful, although this is the key to success, these four things, but it's also about survival. In other words, if you really want to say you like earned salvation in the hereafter, obviously you've got to do these four things, but you've got to have a sense of urgency about it because that's what this whole Asr is telling you, that time is running by, it's passing us by. And if you don't start doing these four things immediately, you will be in the state of loss. Now, the other thing about, like, say, if you are working in a company and you worked hard for many years and you're due for a promotion and you now need to go and see your boss to say, please consider the fact that or reminding him that I'm here and I've done so much good work for the company and all that. And at that point in time, just before you could go and see him, a fire breaks out in the building, the same building where you're working. Now, obviously, your whole frame of mind will be very different then. Instead of going to talk about a promotion prospect to your boss, you suddenly have to now tell everybody fire, fire, and everybody has to now gather whatever they want to and leave the building and evacuate quickly and all the rest of it. So this is what this surah is about. It's like telling us that don't be like in a comfort zone where you forget about what your duties and what you should be doing in life are. It's almost like this whole asr is like a fire situation in our lives. It's there to wake us up and to say, quickly, do something different before your time comes to an end. Then the other concept that comes out in this surah is what is success and what is failure. Now, normally, if you ask people generally, most people will say if you have a house, a car, good job, you have good status in your social circles, you have a good family, you have a good spouse, good children, you might even have good looks. All those things in our mind frame is that is what success is about. Whereas failure is the opposite of that. In other words, if you are homeless so if you had a house, you are successful, and you're homeless, then you're unsuccessful. If you have a car, you're successful, and if you don't have a car, now, unfortunately, the media makes us like value these things, like having a house, having a car, having a good job, having status, having beauty, maintaining that beauty, and all the rest of it. So we have this sort of concept of to be successful in life, you need all these good things, in life, which some of it are essentials, but some are definitely you can do without, and you can still, as it were, survive, because that's what life is about. It's about survival. Now, in history, we have all kinds of examples, right? We have the likes of Pharaoh, Karun, and all the rest of it, the dictators and the tyrants of this world, the extremely wealthy that had palaces, multiple modes of transport, maybe a private yacht and a private plane and good cars and everything of the best, right? But if you look at the lives of the prophets, like if you look at Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, let's take just that one first, right? Muhammad, he was, as it were, by the age of 6 already, he was an orphan, so he didn't have a family to actually, you know, like kind of bond with. And then he lived a life initially in the initial years. He was like looking after sheep, so he was like a herdsman. Then he used to go on these trade missions to the north and south. And then he got married. And then at the age of 40, only his life changed, where when he got wahi, then suddenly there was a whole new like drive in his life to say there are more important things now to be concerned about, which is the akhirah and how not only he should lead his life, but the fact that he should give that message to everybody else also, so that it's not only saving him and his own soul, but saving the ummah and the community around him and giving the message. So it's not something that you just sit back and wish your own salvation or make dua for that only, but you need to have a concern for society around you and bring others who might be going in a deviant kind of way to bring them back on the path and play that role that the Prophet Muhammad and all the other prophets played in their lives to bring the community back to Tawheed and monotheism and all the like. And if you look at Ibrahim alayhi salam, same story. He was kicked out of his house by his father, who was an idol maker, idol manufacturer. And we know how his life went as well. He was given lots of challenges in his life. He had to leave Jerusalem and Hebron and come to Mecca, which was a barren land, and build the Kaaba, which there was nobody there, and he did it because it was a command of Allah. But in essence, all the prophets led very, very simple lives. And if they had wealth, they spent it in the right way and they never hoarded it. They used to be there for people. They were like people kind of persons. So that's the kind of opposites we have, where you have some people that have it all but keep it to themselves and are selfish and only build their own empires. But there are others who have maybe some of it, but they donate and they give off and they encourage and they build other people up and encourage entrepreneurs and build schools and build hospitals and build, you know, things that last as a legacy even beyond their death. So people that have a good concept of the fact that the wealth is also an ammo, but at the same time it has to be used in the right ways. Right? Now, the other thing that comes out in the surah is before, like this tawaso is, I'm sure you have heard of the word wasiya. Wasiya is the noun form, which means uh, giving inheritance, or rather giving your last kind of will, you know, getting your family together and sitting them down and giving them all the advice that you as an older person needs to give them, because you know that your death is imminent and it's going to happen at any time. So it's best that you give them the advice while you're still alive and you have the breath to actually articulate it and say it, and hopefully they will accept it and life will be different in that family. Now, tawaso is that from that root of wasiya, which means you are giving advice to another person. But tawaso also has got another connotation, because tawasi is the verb. When you have a ta in front and an alif inside, it becomes a form 6 verb of tawasi. And then the form 6 means it's a mutual thing. In other words, it's not only you sitting on a high horse and telling others what to do. No, it's not about that. It's about a give and take. In other words, you might be in a position to give that advice now, but by the same token, you must be in a position to accept the advice from others that you have given advice to as well. In other words, it's now not to do with age anymore, where even young people can advise older people. So you need to take advice no matter where it comes from. And the advice is about the haq, what is the truth and what's the honest and the right thing to do. And when you come across challenges, you must also show sabr, help each other through it, and guide people around it. So essentially, what the surah is doing is the rewiring our thinking. We were thinking about success to be one thing, but only to realize from the prophetic traditions and the sunnah of all the prophets that success is actually something else. And success is what this last ayah, which is the longest ayah of this surah, tells us about these four things. Okay, now Imam Shafi once said that if only this surah was revealed and nothing else of the Quran, then actually we have enough for our salvation and our success. And it's something to think about, that how come this surah is so short and so profound in its meaning has got everything that we really need in life for the successful life in this world and the success in the hereafter. And essentially it boils down to these four qualities. And everything starts with Iman, because you can have good people doing good work, like say, in serving in foundations and serving in various NGOs, or doing, good for people. But if they lack Iman or faith, that goodness, while it's still good, but it won't help them to the extent that somebody who's got Iman and does good will have to their sort of credit and to their, unfolding in the year after. Uh, Now, the image of a declining day talks about the stage in our life, right? Where there's very little time left. You must make the most of it while we have it, and take on life and accept the challenges that it throws out at us and overcome those things. So if we fall, we must stand up and carry on. Don't let any impediment or failure stop us from getting up and continuing and achieving and striving in life. Right, now some concepts that the surah linked to. First one is asara, which is the verb from which asar comes out. Now, asara yasiru, means to squeeze or to press or to wring something like water out of a cloth, and or fruit or juice out of a fruit. Right? So it's that kind of verb. It's an action that the fruit is there and you want the juice out of it. So you need to squeeze the fruit to such an extent that all the juice comes out, and then that fruit is no longer like, of value in a sense, or is not longer necessary because you've got the value out of it, which was the juice that you wanted. Now, likewise, in our lives and in our, in our bodies are just there, but we need to guide it to having the right ideas, the right things in our heart about what we value. In that way, that will lead us in the right direction of having the right sort of deeds to do. So this is what the one meaning of asar is, to do it, squeezing out. So it's like the day being squeezed out and night coming out of it. Right? Now, other words that are used in the Quran to talk about time is dahr. Now, this is one of Allah's qualities, that Allah is, in control of time. He owns it, and also at the same time, He is timeless. He doesn't die, and He will be here forever. Okay, and then waqt is the concept that we know, like in hours and minutes and days and months. That's another concept of waqt, like a predefined sort of notion of what time is. Right, so that's the wal asr part. Then we have insan, and the insan comes from the root nasiya. Nasiya with a ya means to forget, right? And because man by his nature is forgetful, therefore he needs these continuous reminders. Like in the surah and many other surahs, you have this reminder that surely man, you are like this, and therefore you need that advice. And this is what Allah is doing us at many, many occasions. He's saying, surely man is in a state of loss. Right? Now, this word khusr is like kind of it's saying we're not in trouble as such, but by virtue of what we do in our lives, we put ourselves into a state of loss. If we think of al-hakumut takathur, where we go, where we do too much for the sake of the dunya and we forget about the akhirah and we forget about the day of accountability, then actually we're putting ourselves in that state of loss. Right? So surely man is going to be in a state of loss. Then you have degrees of this loss. Now you have khusr, which is like one state of loss. Then if you have khasara, which is like a amplified way of saying you had a loss, but now you got a loss above a loss. You know, you got two losses to deal with. That's your state of khasara. And then khusran is like the ultimate, where you have incredible loss, where that noun is just empowered to the nth degree to say any loss that you can think of, you might have it in your life, and that's the state of khusran that you can be. So that's how Allah keeps us away from having, being in a khasara state or in a khusran state, whereas khusr is just one state that we can deal with. Then we talked about tawasi, which means to encourage or exhort one another. It comes from wasiya, which means inheritance. So you're giving advice to somebody, which hopefully that person will take and take it in the spirit it is meant. And you need to obviously advise about two things, which is whatever is the truth and whatever is, you know, standing steadfast in that time of challenges. Now, the Sahaba had a habit that they used to read the surah whenever they parted company. So, in other words, when they met people, they used to, when they leave, they didn't just say Assalamu alaikum and greet and go away. They used to remind each other regularly. And therefore, we also in these lessons, we are ending all our lessons with Wal Asr as the last surah that we read whenever I close the session, because this is where it comes from. That this is a sunnah of the Sahaba, and it's a very good one or good way of parting company, because you are reminding, when you're telling this to others, you're actually reminding yourself first that I must have my iman, and I must, do good deeds, and I must stand by firmly with justice and the rest of it, and be, have sabr. But at the same time, you should also have it. So if we are like guiding each other, giving each other hope and um, advice, that's why the stawasi comes in, where we helping one another to to do this. Okay, then. All right, so we did say well, asr is to do with oath, and that's the object, the asr, and the khusr is the subject, that man is going to be in a loss except if he does that the actions that we spoke of. I just want to refer to one or two things. Right, the word solihat here is quite interesting in that this is a sound feminine plural where you have a alif and a ta at the end. And what that plural means, it's a plural for a few things. So in other words, 3 or up to about 10, you use normally this kind of a plural, right? So when we are asked to do good deeds, we're not asking you to be like a saint or something. We are asking, Allah is saying, وَعْمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. In other words, just do a few good actions and try and do a few good ones every day. And with that few, it will add up to the multitude that you need to safeguard your akhirah. And so it's not a very tall order as such. It's just asking us to do like multiple good deeds, but not so much that you can't do so much. You can even do it, or you can achieve it. It's just asking you to do a few every day. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah, one of the great philosophers of Islam, in his book, he used to say that two things keep mankind back from doing these four things, right? One is the shubuhat. Shubuhat means to have, like mutashabihat is those verses in the Quran that are like kind of gray areas where you don't know for sure what it means. Now, some people focus on the doubtful things. In other words, where there's no like clarity about things. Like if I have to ask you what's the meaning of Tosim meme, I mean, those who go into this area will say, no, Tos means this and Sin means that and meme that, and they give interpretations for something that the Prophet and the Sahaba said, you know what, Tosim meme, only Allah knows what it means, and left it at that. They never delved into it and separated the letters and counted the letter Taw, how many times it appears in that surah. They didn't go to that extent. In other words, they didn't make a numerology effort out of what is in the Quran. So Ibn Taymiyyah is saying that what we shouldn't do is get involved in doubtful things. Generally, we know what's halal and haram. We need to stay on the halal track. Means keep away from all doubtful, makruh things as well as haram things, which is the absolute no-no things. And shahwat is another thing about temptations. Sometimes we feel tempted to maybe eat too much or indulge too much or spend too much or do whatever in a too much kind of way. All all Ibn Taymiyyah is saying is that we must keep away from shubuhat on the one side and also take the middle course in terms of everything we do. So if you eat, eat in moderation. You spend in moderation as well. Right? It's that kind of a thing. Then the idea of Iman. Iman, I think it's on one of the other slides, but Iman is to do with essentially three things. The basis of Iman is Tawheed. And secondly, it's to do with Risala. So Tawheed, we know, is the monotheism, the belief in the oneness of Allah. That's the bedrock of all our Iman, the Tawheed. Then the Risala is the fact that the messengers came with the message of the Quran or the Torah or the Injil or whatever message they brought at the time. Essentially, it's that. And the third component of Iman is the Akhirah, the belief in the day of accountability. So those three things together makes your Iman like complete and makes it strong. Okay, let's move on to the next. Anything else that I haven't spoken about? All right, so true Iman gives the courage to speak up or speak truth to power, as they normally say. There are very few people like it's a very hard thing. It's easy to say that you're honest and you will speak truth to power, but when it comes to the reality, it's not a very easy thing to do. So it can be in a workplace where you're working with people that have different views or different ideas or even different interpretations of history. And you need to stand up and have the courage to talk about what is the truth. Even though you might be a single person standing out there like a sore thumb amongst a group of people that have a different view. So while Jahiliyyah is prevalent in society, we need to stand by our Iman and our firmness in our belief. And likewise, we should also have sabr, which is patience, perseverance, continued commitment, constancy. We shouldn't waver. And that is essentially true obedience. Right? So it's a very heavy surah in one way, in that it's telling us to do quite a bit, but that Salihat does tell you it's just a few good deeds that you need to do. And inshallah, that will see us through in terms of securing our agenda, inshallah. Okay, so I want to end off with this particular. It's not a hadith, it's not a quotation, nothing. It's just somebody reflecting on history. Now, the way this quotation goes is it says it has been written that the one who falls in love with his religion, in other words, abides by all its concepts and precepts and whatever it needs, whatever we need to do. If you really truly believe in that, then tawasi bil haq becomes second nature to you, to such an extent that even if you become a fugitive, in other words, you have to run away from your homeland or renounce your identity or even your citizenship of a country or become a refugee. Sometimes religion makes you do that, right? It makes you a fugitive. Other times it's so amazing that it throws you into prison, in that you so much counter the grain of what society is about, that the people in charge see you as a threat and regard you as a terrorist and throw you into jail and really make your life miserable in jail. Now, we know many such examples in this current day and age. I mean, we have Imran Khan, like a legitimate leader, and thrown into a prison and languishing there still. Right? In Tunisia, they did the same thing. So all these empires, these people that they do regime changes, so they look at people that stand by principle and they target them and they get rid of them, right? Or the ultimate is where you become a martyr. Now, Shaheed, that is like the ultimate sort of relief to you as a man of principle or a woman of principle. Now it says the darkened prisons are overflowing with the people of Tawheed as it is part of Iman. Now remember the trials. And the trials, if we read our Islamic history, we had all these great people suffering in one way or the other. Now, At-Tabari was a famous Mufassir, means a scholar that wrote one of the most famous books of tafsir, a commentary on the Quran. And he wrote a famous history book, which is the story about the annals and kings of before. So from the time of creation till the time when he lived, and maybe I'll just show you the next slide. Tabari died in 923. Now, we remember 632 is when the Prophet ﷺ died. So he lived like 2.5 centuries after the Prophet, right? So this is what he did. He wrote a famous Quran commentary, and he wrote this famous Tarikh al-Rasul al-Muluk, right? The commentary, the history of all the prophets that we know of, and all the kings that ruled various parts of the world. And his fate was, according to this, he died besieged. In other words, he was like kind of imprisoned or in a house and nobody could visit him. And that was his end, although he stood and did so much of good work for the Ummah that came after him. Then we look at Al-Bukhari. He was a famous hadith compiler. He wrote the Sahih al-Bukhari. He's one of the six great muhaddithun. Two of them wrote Sahihs and the other four wrote other books. I think we mentioned that in the previous surah, but we didn't talk about it much. But Bukhari as well, at the end of his life, he lived, literally had to go into the desert. He lived on his own, isolated, because somehow the community rejected him, and his own students that studied under him became his adversaries and worked him out of the system, although he was such a great man. So Bukhari was one of those. And Nasai is also another famous hadith scholar. He was murdered. Ibn Hazm was a famous scholar in Spain. He was also hunted down and, you know, um, I don't know if he was killed or not, I'm not sure. But Abu Hanifa, we know he was one of the four Imams. Ibn Malik ibn Anas was another Imam. Imam Shafi was also an Imam. And Imam Ahmad also got tortured before he died. So all the four Imams, the four madhabs that we know of, these four great people also either died in captivity or they got tortured or they got imprisoned or they got flogged. And some of them were so badly hurt that it's amazing they actually survived the torture they went through at the hands of the caliphs of the day. Then we have other just great scholars, Thawri and Sahib. So all in all, they say if trials become harder for the righteous believer, they're only a means for him or her to reach a loftier rank and a greater reward. So sometimes the harder the trial, the greater the benefit you'll see out of the trial that you might have gone through in life. So may Allah keep us guided. Um, Maybe I'll just screen this. You can just have a quick browse to it. I don't want to read through all this, but I think it's important for us to know our history. There's a lot of important personalities that have sort of lived and contributed in many, many profound ways to such an extent that they kept the deen alive in the times of, tribulation and onslaught and caliphs demanding that, you know, jurists of the day toe the line and do what the Khalif tells them to do. And some of them stood their ground and said, no, we won't do what you want us to do. And even if you throw us in prison, so what? We'll go into prison and we'll stand by what we still agree. And ultimately, Allah will be the judge and he'll know that we were on the right path. And you, the Khalif or the leader of the day or the Qadi of the time, you were wrong and I was right. So all in all, I think at the end of time, we're going to have this ultimate day of accountability where the truth will shine out and whatever was batil or false will perish. And inshallah, all these people will their memories are etched in history because they did so much for the sake of Islam. And inshallah, we should also become like them one day in whichever way possible. Okay, so with that, we end with the Surah al Asar. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal Asr, inna al-insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat, wa tawasaw bil haqq, wa tawasaw bil sabr.